Hi, and welcome to Living and Learning. Today's episode is going to be about how to do an effective college interview. And I'm really pleased to have a special guest with us today, and that is Dr. Gary Genard. Gary is the president of the Genard method. He is a former actor and currently a trainer and coach in teaching public speaking skills, and has taught hundreds, I believe, hundreds of diplomats, university professors, CEOs at various organizations. He is also an author of two books. One is going on its second edition, which is a testimonial to how good a book it is. The first one on how to give a speech, and the second one is on fearless speaking. So today, because public speaking is something that most people would rather, hug a snake than get out in front of an audience and give a talk, right? So instead, what we thought we'd do today is something a little bit more fun. So in this episode, we're going to do a little bit of a mock interview where I'm going to play the somewhat ineffectual high school student on a college interview, and Gary is going to be the admissions officer conducting the interview. And then at a certain point, I'm going to stop talking and Gary will give me feedback about how I could potentially improve what it is that I'm saying or doing. So we're going to start, just to give you the lay of the land, with a situation where I'm in a college admissions office at Starboard University, and the receptionist points me down the hall to Gary Genard's office, and I knock on the door, and just from that point, he gets to have a first impression of who I am, and he'll get to know, and I'm going to use my name, Karen Kugel. He will address me as that. And then we'll go through an interview, and we'll take some breaks, as I mentioned, in between, just so that you get the format, and we'll end up with how to actually do a very strong follow-up to an interview, even if you might potentially mess up a little bit in the beginning. So that is the format for our show, and we're going to try to have some fun with it too, and I'm looking forward to it. So stay tuned. Here we go.
Karen, welcome.
Hi. Thanks so much for meeting with me.
It's
Appreciate
so nice.
it.
It's nice to meet you.
Okay. All right. Is this okay? Is this a good place to sit?
Yes, yes,
okay.
this is absolutely fine.
Okay.
So you went on the tour?
Yes, yeah, I went on the tour this morning. I really think Starboard University is great, and my parents went here, and that's the reason why they wanted me to come. And my dad said he would probably never get in if he applied today, but my mother would argue with him, say, "Of course you would, of course you would." But I just feel like. Anyway, they thought that I should come for an interview because it is a great place. They loved it, and so I thought I would come here and do this interview with you today. I'm Miss. What your name is, Mr. Genard?
Genard, yes,
oh, yeah,
that's
thank
correct.
You.
That's
okay.
correct.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Well,
Okay.
Karen, we're very pleased that you're here and that you had the chance to see the university. And did you have the opportunity to ask some questions during the tour?
No, there wasn't really time for that. It just seemed very busy, but I took some notes that other people had some questions that I thought were good.
Okay, well, let's start out by, if you would, tell me something about yourself.
Oh, I already mentioned that, my mom and dad went to school here. And I live in Concord now, and I'm at Concord High School. I'm on the track team, and I play clarinet.
Oh, okay. Well, that's terrific. And what attracted you to Starboard University?
Again, I told you about my parents. They went here. They loved it. I've been on campus a few times with them. And so, all the activities that they had, it would just blow my mind. There were so many things happening on campus that I just felt like maybe this is a good place for me to be. I mean, I thought about some other places too. You know, I went to TU and I went to Northwestern State and, you know, some of these other places. But, you know, this is probably the best. Yeah. So.
Let's talk about that.
Okay. So, you just heard me do a little bit of my introduction. So now it's going to be Gary's turn to give me some feedback and a little bit of coaching as I try to redo some of those parts of my introduction and the question, tell me about myself. Okay? So Gary, do you want to start by giving me some feedback and then we can redo some parts of it?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Karen. Well, what I think we saw when Karen came in and we started the interview was that she was very nervous, and she was exhibiting the nervousness in different ways, which we do. And in order to be at your very best when you are in a situation like this, we want to get a little bit of control over the nervousness and how it manifests itself. So the very first thing you can do is think about breathing. Because when we get nervous, we tend to breathe shallowly, and we are not giving ourselves enough breath to speak to start with. And also, just the fact that we're feeling nervous is showing itself in our mannerisms. And
like doing this.
Yeah, and usually people can pick up on that pretty quickly. So let's take the start of our interview again, and this time we'll focus a little bit on body language because interestingly, most nervousness isn't visible, but the aspects of it that have to do with
That's
body...
a really good point.
Really,
that's very true.
The aspects of it that have to do with body language is what makes it noticeable to other people. So if we can get control of the body language, then we're not going to appear so nervous to the people we're speaking to. And the nice part about that, Karen, is because we know we're not appearing nervous, we don't feel as nervous. Mm-hmm. So it's a positive loop of confidence rather than a negative loop of nervousness.
Sounds good to me.
So let's take it from your entrance again.
All right.
Hi, Karen.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Oh, well, now that is a very different handshake than we had the first time. The first time Karen came in the room, the handshake was like this.
This is like the two-finger shake.
The two-finger handshake. So we want a full grasp, and actually grasp. Mm-hmm. Give me some strength in your hand.
Yep.
That's it. And
that's it.
A couple of pumps up and down.
Okay.
And that's a good firm handshake. And that gives me a good impression of you right away.
Good, good. Okay.
And now, of course, rather than retreating to the seat, what you want to do is ask for the interviewer to invite you to sit down. Have a seat, Karen.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thanks for coming.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that you could spend the time with me today.
Well, did you have an opportunity to take the tour?
I did, and it was amazing. I was so impressed and so just astounded by the amazing things that I could see on campus. The dormitories were great, the library, the art studios, the conference halls. I was very impressed.
Wonderful. Now notice how Karen is not fidgeting the way she was the first time. She was fidgeting with her necklace and her hair, and there were lots of nervous movements which were giveaways that she was actually very anxious about the situation and the interview. And this time when I asked you if you had taken the tour, you were very specific about some of the sites that you saw on the campus. The first time you were rambling about things which really didn't have a lot to do with actually what you were seeing on the campus, and it was just another tip-off that you were nervous. Right. So notice how this time Karen is much more focused, she's still, she's poised, and when she mentions things, it's concise, and she's talking about particular things, and she's not letting the nervousness get away and carry her along. Once that happens, of course, it's very hard to try to get yourself back on track. So it's better to breathe and use focused body language when you begin, and then you make it much easier for yourself for everything that follows.
Yeah. Now, Gary, I would like to ask a question about that, about the nervousness, sure. Because there is the nervousness that happens on the spot. But what advice would you give to prepare someone going into an interview on how to calm themselves and relax even before they get into the interview phase?
Well, you know, Karen, that's a great point. And it's actually very important that you do that, because once the moment of nervousness and anxiety hits, it's very hard to get out of it because it's like a tailspin.
Yeah.
And it's really too late. So once again, the way that you can best protect yourself against this is by breathing and learning diaphragmatic breathing, which is belly breathing.
Right, so
and
can
knowing how
you
to
give us a little
well, sure.
demo of that?
The
Yeah.
diaphragm is here, and when we breathe, when we inhale, the diaphragm descends and it pushes out the abdominal area so that when you breathe in, you see this. The belly comes out, and when you breathe out, the diaphragm goes back to its relaxed state and the abdominal wall comes in. So the way that you can judge whether you're breathing diaphragmatically and getting a full reservoir of air
Oh yeah, that's a good question.
is
I
to
wanted to know that.
actually is to do the belly breathing and to feel the action down here with the belly coming in and out rather than the chest rising or even the shoulders rising. If you can learn how to breathe diaphragmatically and get good at it, you'll always have enough air. Your heart rate will be slower because it's calm and you're not having to work against the nervousness, and you'll also, not so incidentally, have enough air to say what you want to say and say it strongly with great projection and to have a strong voice.
Okay.
So the key, once again, is to get in the habit of breathing well rather than breathing shallowly,
Right.
because at the moments when you do feel nervous and anxious, your breath will be there to support you. And incidentally, if you're feeling anxious at any point, the best thing you can do is to take 10 slow, deep breaths. And that'll bring you right down
that's
from that
good.
level of anxiousness and anxiety and nervousness and make you feel much better about the situation, whatever the situation may be.
I'll have to try that. So I did want to ask you, on purpose, I was using a lot of verbal crutches, like, you know, the habits that we all get into in our everyday speech. What tips could you give us about how to deal with that, or how, because it's not going to happen overnight. I'm not going to stop saying like and you know in one day. So what tricks do you have to address that?
These are called verbal fillers,
Okay.
or vocal fillers, or verbalized pauses.
Yeah.
And they're often very common, and depending upon your age and your the groups that you hang out with, some are more prevalent than others. And we always know about the ums and the ers, but like and sort of and kind of.
Whatever.
Whatever, or even yeah. People
Yes.
will nervously say, yeah, and then
Yeah.
go on with what they're saying.
Right.
So
You probably heard them all.
they're actually, they're a challenge. They're a challenge to deal with. And the first step is to become aware of them. And once you're aware of them, to start the process, and it could take a while to learn how to overcome them. Now, what I recommend, if you are working on anything that has to do with vocal issues and is not necessarily what you were doing with body language or the other aspects of performance, then the best thing you can do is to work with a tape recorder or your smartphone or whatever digital recording device you have, and record yourself in a typical situation, an interview or a talk or remarks or even a presentation, and listen, because for all of us, visuals are the most seductive aspect when we see a person speak and we experience a person speaking. So if we are no different from anybody else. So if we're watching ourselves, if we videotaped ourselves, we'll be more likely to pay attention to the visuals rather than the vocals and the verbals. So what can be very helpful is to just eliminate the visuals and only record yourself in terms of vocal recording and not videotape yourself, because you'll pay 100% of attention to what you're saying, and you can slowly start this process of learning how not to use the vocal fillers.
Right. That's a great idea. I'll definitely try that. I think we all fall victim to it a little bit of laziness there with the vocal fillers, especially when you're nervous. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to our next question. So right now, Gary is going to be the interviewer again, and he's going to ask me a question that might make me feel a little uncomfortable. And so we're going to deal with how do you handle that on the fly, a question that might make you feel a little bit edgy, okay? All right.
Karen, would you share with me what your least favorite subject was in high school and why that was the case?
Well, the least favorite subject, I guess I like English, I do, but writing it can be really a challenge. I mean, sometimes I just sit in front of the computer screen and I just stare at it, or I just Google how to write the essay. I mean, and I try, and then I get lost in how to get something done. I really have a hard time. You know, if it's a page, a lab report, a chemistry thing, I can write a couple of sentences, but I have a real hard time if it goes on to a page or two. And I just, so I guess I would have to say that writing and maybe English would be my heart. I'm really good at math, and I love chemistry, and I'm great at physics. But the writing is a little bit of a problem for me.
Okay.
Right. So now Gary could give his feedback about handling that kind of a question.
I think there were two red flags there, Karen. I think first is your hesitation in being able to simply answer the question.
Right. Okay.
There was a lot of kind of throat clearing where you started to try and went down some
So I showed
paths,
some nervousness there.
Yes, that's right. It's the
Yeah.
body language that
Right.
we were talking about.
Right.
And even the nervousness in this case was exhibited not only in the body language, but actually the verbal content as well.
Right.
Because you went down a number of dead ends before you decided,
Right.
well, maybe I won't say that.
Exactly.
I'll kind
I
of
backed out.
I'll,
Yeah.
I'll hit reverse and come back
Exactly.
out to the main
Yeah.
road.
Exactly. Right.
And then I'll start again, and well, here is
But
another.
I'm really good at this.
Yes, right.
Yeah,
Yes, and at
exactly.
the end, it was kind of a desperate attempt
To
say,
save
well, I
myself.
really am good at something, and these are the topics that I really am good at.
Right.
So there was that going on, and
Yeah.
I think the second red flag here, in terms of a college interview, of course, is if you say to a college admissions officer, well, I don't like writing and I'm not very good at it, because let's face it, in college you are going to be writing a lot.
Right.
You are going to be writing many essays.
That's right.
Not only in English, but in all your topics. And one of the aspects of a college education is so that you can get much better at thinking, doing research, and writing about it.
Right.
Writing in a way that's concise, that's interesting, that's well organized, and that makes your point strongly. So
Right.
writing is a very important part of the college experience. And if you're telling an admissions officer at the very beginning, this is one thing I hate, and anyway, I'm not good at it.
Right.
I can write one or two sentences if it's a chemical formula.
You're right, right.
But the rest of it's going to give me a real problem. Then I think that's probably not something that's going to help your case.
Right, right. And one thing that I would add to that is that I could possibly have salvaged myself with the question, what is my least favorite subject, if I had said, writing has been a challenge for me. However, one of the things I do is I have a writing tutor now, or I go to the teacher after school and ask them to break down the writing assignment into smaller steps so that it's more manageable. It's still a challenge for me, but I'm working on it, and I'm sure by the time I get into college, it won't be a big problem. And by the way, do you have tutoring sessions and resource centers on the college campus? And then that would give the admissions person an opportunity to say something nice about the resources that they might have for students who need help and support with writing. Okay, so now,
if I may,
yeah, go ahead.
I think that's very important, because it's similar to the advice that I give if I'm helping people with job interviews.
Oh, okay.
Which is if you're asked something about something that you have difficulty with, or that you've failed at, or that a painful experience that you are being asked to share with the interviewer, then it's important for you to say, basically, yes, I did experience this difficulty, or I did have this failure, but what I learned from that is, and going forward, what I would use from that experience. I think it's very important to get across that this was in fact a learning experience for you, and you are going to be able to use it to your advantage in
Right.
whatever the situation is that you are going to be facing now, whether it's being in college or being hired by a company.
Yes, I think that is the important point, that we all have obstacles and that we can learn how to become aware of them, and then we put something into place to overcome them, and that we'll continue to work on it.
Yes, absolutely. And the other aspect of this I think is important to do is when you do tell the interviewer the situation that you are discussing in specifics and that he or she is specifically asked about, I think it's important always to bring it back to the institution, the company, the kind of studying that you will do at this college, the kind of work you will do for this company, to take it from some situation which may have been very different from the one that you are going to be dealing with, and to relate it, because after all, what is interesting to the interviewer is how you're going to do in this particular instance, in this particular institution that you find yourself at, which I think you did.
Right. Well,
So
we're
well
working
done.
we're working at that, right? Okay. So now let's assume that this is a maybe 20-minute interview or so, and Gary has already asked me a few other questions about me. Maybe I've handed him a resume, and so he knows a little bit more about me now. So at this point, he may close and say something like, "Are there any
Karen.
questions?" Yes, thank you.
Well, this has been delightful. I'm so pleased you've been here, and it's been wonderful for me to learn something about you and your activities and what your interests are. And I think you've been very helpful in giving me some of the information that we can use when we make our decision. And I would like to ask you if you have any questions about Starbird University, and if there's anything you'd like to know about us and what we do here.
You know, I think I'm good. Thanks for meeting with me.
Oh, wait! Come back here, you!
Okay. Okay. So, as you can see there, I've missed an opportunity to ask some additional questions that could, in fact, turn what might have been a little bit of an iffy interview in the beginning. That would have been my opportunity to turn things around. So Gary, if you want to ask the question again, I'll give you some answers that I think might work successfully.
I'd be happy to, Karen.
Okay.
So, Karen, we're delighted that you've been here and you've been telling us some things about yourself and your activities and your interests, and so we have a much better idea of how you might fit in here at Starbird University. And I would like to ask you if you have any questions that you'd like to share with me now that I hope I can answer as to the university and any of life here or our activities or our philosophy that you'd like to know more about.
Right. Well, you know, you mentioned, Gary, that you attended this school as well. So I'm just wondering, what was your experience like?
Well, I have always felt that these were 4 of the best years of my life. And I thought this was a tremendous opportunity. I'm glad I took it. And I've never looked back from that. And I think that I made the most of the time that I had here, because there's nothing like your college years. And to be able to spend time and spend 4 years learning, imagine what a wonderful thing that is. Is that something that you would be prepared to do here? Is that the kind of philosophy that you have?
Well, so far from the tour and my parents' impression of the place and from what I've read about Starbird and from our talk, I want to apply early decision. This is my first choice. And I'm wondering, at this point, do you feel like I would be a good fit here? What's your impression?
Well, and Karen, what do you think the interviewer would say at that point?
I think typically an interviewer would give a positive response in terms of, we invite you to apply to our school. It seems like it could be a good experience for you. I can't make any judgment because we look at students holistically and we take many things into account, but I would encourage you to apply. And that might be a typical type of response that one might get from a college admissions officer, or sometimes the interview is conducted by a student or an alum. So they're typically instructed not to give any thumbs up, thumbs down on any particular student, but they encourage them to apply and to explore even more, like go and sit in on a class or come back again or anything like that. I can think of another question if you want to ask me. Are there any other questions that I might have? There's another one that could be helpful too. So
I'll take that hint. Are there any other questions? Are there any other questions that you have, Karen?
Well, now that you know about my wishes for attending this school and you know something about me, what advice could you give me, Gary, about how I could enhance my chances of getting in here?
Well, that's great. That's a very good response. It opens it up.
Right.
And you're actually asking for something that would be constructive in your ability to succeed in this situation, and I think that's terrific. Okay. And I'd like to say something else about the importance of what you say at the end of the interview, and also relate that to what you do and say at the beginning of the interview. And that's because the first impressions that we make and the last impression that we make is extremely important.
Right.
In sticking in someone's mind and being memorable in some way. Mm-hmm. And so, as we know, people make decisions and judgments about us very quickly. And as the great comedian of the mid-20th century, Will Rogers, said, you never have a second chance to make a first impression.
That's true. Very
so
true.
Whatever you do and show at the beginning of your encounter with an interviewer is going to be very important as to what they think of you and how they remember you. And the same is true at the end, because this is the last thing that you say. And so you want to say something that will allow that person to go away with a positive impression of you that will continue over the time that this person or this admissions committee is making its decision.
Right.
So I would say do what you did in this second simulation, which is do your homework and think specifically of some things that you would like to know about, in this case, Starbird University, not just generic questions, but something that you truly would like to know and you sincerely are interested in learning. Mm-hmm. And pose the question that way. Just pose it honestly with directness and focus, and that'll go a long way to helping strengthen and keep a strong impression of you in that person's mind.
Great. Well, thank you. So, as we wrap up, I'm going to ask you, Gary, to give me a summary. You kind of gave me some of those points already, but if we want to take it from the top in terms of the things that you need to keep in mind in an interview situation.
Well, the first thing I think, of course, is to be prepared. There's no substitute for preparation, and there's also no substitute for preparation when it comes to your level of confidence. If you feel that you are prepared, you will be confident. Right. And when you're confident, you get good feedback from the people you're talking to, which, as I said earlier, makes you more confident.
Right.
I would say have 3 to 5 questions prepared. Specific questions that get to the heart of what you truly would like to know about this institution. Right. I would say pay attention to your body language and practice.
Oh, you mean like none of this?
Just exactly like that.
Right. Good thing I don't have a high collar on. I know.
Practice the diaphragmatic breathing that we talked about, the belly breathing.
Yeah.
And although
I'm going to remember that. I'm putting that on my list of things to do, along with working out.
Good, good. And although we haven't talked about it specifically, good, solid eye contact is very important. The fact is we tend to look at people less when we're speaking than when we're listening. The listener usually makes better eye contact than the person speaking.
Oh, that's an interesting point.
So we may need to teach ourselves to keep and maintain good eye contact when we're speaking. And the last thing that I would say is have an elevator speech. I mean, it doesn't need to be a speech, of course, but something that's about a minute long where you can ask some specific things in a concise and interesting way, and always have that in your pocket so that there's something that you have prepared and
To describe yourself.
You're
Yeah.
ready to go with. It may be describing yourself. It may be sharing some experience that you've had in the college tour or
Right.
in
Oh,
your
yeah, that's
research
true.
on
Yeah.
the institution. Once again, it would, in that case, it would be bringing it back to the institution. So something that's of a short amount of time that really has some impact, and again, that can help make you a more memorable candidate at this particular college.
Great. So is that something that you think people should memorize or just have bullet points in their mind?
I'm not a big believer in memorization.
Oh, okay.
Because what happens when we memorize things is when we're in the moment and speaking to people, we're really trying to remember something and we're not really there for them in the moment. So I would say know the topics that you want to talk about, know what those 2 or 3 or 4 things are, and be willing to talk about them spontaneously, but in a way that you've done some preparation on and you've prepared, because then it will feel and sound and look like it's in the moment.
Right.
And that's when communication really gets good and has a lot of impact, because it's real. It's not something that you're just trying to do from memory or trying to roll out a beautiful short speech. It's topics that you're prepared to talk about, and you can do it in the moment when it has the most impact.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to have you here, and I hope you all feel the same way, that it was really wonderful to have an expert in public speaking and public speaking coaching giving us his time, Gary Genard, to go through what it is to be effective in an interview format. And as I'm sure you've recognized, and Gary alluded to some of this too, is that even though this format is for a college interview, many of the things that we talked about here can carry over to job interviews, to internship interviews, scholarship interviews, coaching situations if you're applying for a position on a team, a sports team, an orchestra, an art exhibit, whatever. These are things that you're going to do for the rest of your life. So there is no wasted time or effort in thinking about these things, about controlling body language, reading body language, the purpose of rehearsing and practicing ahead of time and getting that elevator speech. Any one of these things, coming prepared with questions, will serve you well really in anything that you do in life. So I hope you've benefited from this session. We'll have many more of them to come. We'll probably do one on how to prepare for the interview in terms of what you need to know, and likely at some point in the future we'll do one on how to prepare for a job interview, covering perhaps some of the same topics. So thank you again for joining us, and I look forward to having you join us again. Thank you.